Yeah. And we start. Go ahead, Hannah. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Bismillah. The divine attributes. Allah, the all-comprehensive name, refers to all attributes of being at once. It also alludes to being's relationship with the whole hierarchy of existence that reflects its attributes in varying intensities, a hierarchy that is called, in the language of the theologians, the acts of God. Other divine names refer to relatively specific attributes of being, such as life, knowledge, desire, power, speech, generosity, and justice. According to a saying of the Prophet ﷺ, there are 99 of these most beautiful divine names, though other names are expressed or implied in the Quran and various prophetic sayings. Each name enunciates an attribute of God, sheer being. The effect, athar, or property, hukm, of each name can be traced within existence, if, that is, we are given the insight and wisdom to do so. This, in fact, is the task that Ibn al-Arabi undertakes in the Futuhat, though he is fully aware that every book in the universe would be insufficient to record all the properties of the divine names, all the words of God. As the Quran puts it, though all the trees in the earth were pens, and the sea, 7 seas after it to replenish it, were ink, yet would the words of God not be spent. As was pointed out earlier, the name Allah refers to God's essence, attributes, and acts. The essence of God.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. The essence is God in himself without reference to anything else. As such, where's it gone? As such, God is unknowable to any but himself. He is, as Ibn al-Arabi quotes constantly, independent of the worlds. And this includes the knowledge possessed by the worlds. God is, as the essence, is contrasted with God inasmuch as he assumes relationships with the cosmos, relationships denoted by various divine names such as creator, maker, shaper, generous, just, exalter, abaser, life-giver, slayer, forgiver, pardoner, avenger, grateful, and patient. Inasmuch as God's essence is independent of the worlds, the cosmos is not he. But inasmuch as God freely assumes relationships with the worlds through attributes such as creativity and generosity, the cosmos manifests the he. If we examine anything in the universe, God is independent of that thing and infinitely exalted beyond it. He is, to employ the theological term that plays a major role in Ibn al-Arabi's vocabulary, incomparable, tanzih, with each thing and all things. But at the same time, each thing displays one or more of God's attributes, and in this respect, the thing must be said to be similar, tashbih, in some way to God. The very least we can say is that it exists and God exists, even though the modalities of existence may be largely incomparable. Many scholars have employed the terms transcendence and immanence, or anthropomorphism, in referring to these two ways of conceptualizing God's relationship with the cosmos. But I will refrain from using these words in an attempt to avoid preconceptions and capture the nuances of the Arabic terminology. When Ibn al-Arabi speaks about the essence as such, he has in view God's incomparability. In this respect, there is little one can say about God except to negate, salb, the attributes of created things from him. Nevertheless, the essence is God as he is in himself, and God must exist in himself before he reveals himself to others. Both logically and ontologically, incomparability precedes similarity. It is the ultimate reference point for everything we say about God. A great deal can indeed be said about him. That, after all, is what religion and revelation are all about. But once said, it must also be negated. Our doctrines, dogmas, theologies, and philosophies exist like other things, which is to say that they also are he, not he. Discerning the modalities and relationships, distinguishing the true from the false, and the more true from the less true, is the essence of wisdom. When Ibn al-Arabi speaks about God's attributes and acts, he has in view the divine similarity. In this respect, many things can be attributed to God, although it is best to observe courtesy, adab, by attributing to him only that which he has attributed to himself in revelation. What he has attributed to himself is epitomized by his names and attributes, the discussion of which delineates Ibn al-Arabi's fundamental approach to the exposition of the nature of things. The attributes are reflected in the acts, i.e., all things found in the cosmos. God's power is reflected passively in everything he has made, and actively in suns, volcanoes, seas, bees, human beings, and other creatures. His hearing is found in every animal and perhaps in every plant as well. His speech is certainly reflected in the cries, calls, and chirps of animals, but only in the same way that a glowing ember may be said to manifest the light of the sun. Only in the human being, the crown of that creation with which we are familiar, can speech reach a station where it expresses intelligence and truth, and in prayer becomes discourse between man and God. Call upon me, says God in the Quran, to man, not to monkeys or parrots, and I will answer you. For Ibn al-Arabi, the divine names are the primary reference points in respect to which we can gain knowledge of the cosmos. In the Futuhat, he constantly discusses words and technical terms that were employed by theologians, philosophers, and Sufis before him. For example, he has chapters devoted to many of the states, ahwal, and stations, maqamat, that are discussed in detail in Sufi works. These represent the psychological, moral, and spiritual attributes and perspectives that mark degrees of spiritual growth which travelers on the path to God must experience, assimilate, and in most cases pass beyond. Examples include attributes that are paired and usually must be actualized together, such as hope and fear, expansion and contraction, intoxication and sobriety, annihilation and subsistence, and other attributes which are viewed as marking a kind of ascending hierarchy, such as awakening, repentance, self-examination, meditation, ascetic discipline, abstinence, renunciation, desire, refinement, sincerity, confidence, satisfaction, gratitude, humility, joy, certainty, courtesy, remembrance, good doing, wisdom, inspiration, love, jealousy, ecstasy, tasting, immersion, realization, and unity. Ibn al-Arabi devotes about 200 chapters of the Futuhat to such terminology. The point to be made here is that his characteristic mode of approach is to discuss briefly what previous masters have said about these qualities, and then to bring out what he calls the divine root, al-asl al-ilahi, or the divine support, al-mustanad al-ilahi, of the essence of the quality in question. What is it about God, Allah, the all-comprehensive reality, that allows such a quality to be manifested in existence in the first place, and then to be assumed by a human being? In a few cases, the answer is immediately clear. Love is attributed to God in many places in the Quran, so the love that the spiritual traveler acquires must be a reflection of that divine love. But in most cases, the divine root can only be brought out by a subtle analysis of Quranic verses and hadiths. Invariably, these analyses circle around the names and attributes that are ascribed to God in the revealed texts. It must be concluded from the above, and a great deal more evidence that will present itself naturally in the course of the present book, that the divine names are the single most important concept to be found in Ibn al-Arabi's works. Everything, divine or cosmic, is related back to them. Neither the divine essence nor the most insignificant creature in the cosmos can be understood without reference to them. It is true that the essence is unknown in itself, but it is precisely the essence that is named by the names. There are not two realities, essence and name, but a single reality, the essence, which is called by a specific name in a given context and from a particular point of view. A single person may be father, son, brother, husband, and so on, without becoming many people. By knowing the person as father, we know him, but that does not mean we know him as brother. Likewise, by knowing any name of God, we know God, but not necessarily in respect of another name, nor in respect to his very self or essence. In the same way, God's creatures must be known in terms of the divine names for any true knowledge to accrue. Every attribute possessed by a creature can be traced back to its ontological root, God himself. The existence of the creature derives from God's being, its strength from God's power, its awareness from God's knowledge, and so on. Obviously, there are many more attributes in creation than those delineated by the 99 most beautiful names. So the task of explaining the divine root of a thing through language is not at all straightforward. If it were, the Futuhat would fill 100 pages instead of 17,000. However this may be, it is sufficient for present purposes to realize that the essence manifests itself in the divine names, and the names in turn are revealed through the divine acts.
Thank you,
Is
Hannah. That was
it?
beautiful. For now, yes.
Welcome.
And we'll move on to the next section. Thank you so much, Hannah. That was wonderful. In summary, to make a long story short, the divine names are key. He's going to get into them in the next chapter. That's what we start with. The whole thing starts with the divine names and it ends with the divine names. If you look at the Quran really, one of its major themes is the divine names. وهو السميع عليم وهو السميع البصير. And then you've got like many other conjunction of names that go along with it. Because the divine names are what underlie the structure and stuff of the cosmos. There's nothing you can look at that can't be related to a divine name. So it's one reality, but the way you understand that reality changes in relation to what you're seeing, right? So that's why the example of father is really good. Because Faris as father is different to Faris as brother, who is different to Faris as son, who is even different to Faris as nephew or grandson. But it's one person. Like shirk is when you accidentally multiply the persons by multiplying the relations. That's the mistake, you see? But it's actually just one reality, but many relations, right? Are there any confusing points here, or can we move on? All right, let's move on to the next one, please. Divine acts. Can I get a next reader, please?
So may I mean, ask just a little bit, because here we see the traditional kalam vocabulary in which in which the entire relationship between the God and the human beings is actually with the help of new vocabulary and the methodology is changed. For example, previous mutakallimin seem to be very border oriented and very specific in the sense that God's attributes are these and the creatures are that. But here, I think quite beautifully, Sheikh Muhyiddin ibn Arabi changes the vocabulary as well as brings some sort of complexity in understanding the relationship in a more deeper, in a more complex way, so that his vocabulary could show some sort of infinity in the creativity as well as in the in human beings too. This is what I mean. I make sense that he changes. I mean, the traditional conceptual approach to the ontology and metaphysics of Islam. I don't know. I mean, to what extent?
Thank you so much. No, let me think on that. By the way, that's a good observation. Save for the end, and let me answer you in the end. But it's a very good observation because it raises the question: to what extent is he contributing to the tradition, right? To what extent is he being muhyiddin? Is he reviving or revivifying the religion by breathing new life into it, right? And therefore by breathing new meaning into the kalam vocabulary? That's an excellent question, see? But just remind me in the end so I can come back to it. All right, next reader, please. Okay, I'll read, and then we'll pick another one for the next section, inshallah. So we'll go through the divine acts. The term acts has many synonyms that Ibn al-Arabi is more likely to employ, though each synonym has its own connotations and nuances that can only become clear when it is explained in detail and employed in context. And I'm sorry, I know this is technical, but it's worth getting technical in the beginning so that when you get going, you understand why he does that. Acts are found in the intermediate domain known as existence. So their state remains forever ambiguous, right? It makes sense. If it's in wujud, by definition, it's ambiguous. To what extent they reflect the light of being is always at issue. The word acts itself implies their existence, since the acts pertain to the divine presence. And by definition, God is sheer being. هو الوجود المطلق. In a similar way, the synonymous term creatures, خلق مخلوقات, demands that the acts be the result of the activity of the divine name creator. That's connection to the divine names. If you have مخلوقات, there has to be a خالق. If there's a Rabb, you'll get a marbub, whose business is to bring things out from non-existence into existence. Here also the term emphasizes the light of being, reflected in the things of the cosmos. Another common term applied to anything in the cosmos is form, surah. This is a big term. As Ibn al-Arabi says, there's nothing in the cosmos but forms, surah. But the term form normally calls to mind a second reality, which the form manifests. So X is the form of Y, right? So you say like, for example, milk in a dream is the form of knowledge, right? This second reality is often called the meaning, the mind of the form. So these are what's called coterminous terms that you can't separate them. Like high and low come together. There's no such thing as like something that's like absolutely high or absolutely low. So form and meaning go together. Whenever you talk about form, there must be meaning. And whenever you talk about meaning, there must be form. At first sight, the term existence, mawjudat, clearly affirms the reality of the created things, but a more careful analysis makes it ambiguous, since existence itself stands in an intermediary situation. Nevertheless, we can contrast existence with non-existence, ma'dumat, in which case a clear distinction must be drawn. Here the point is that there are degrees of participation in the light of being. So some created things participate in wujud more than others, right? Those things, and of course, the more wujud you have, the more complete you are, and the less wujud you have, the less complete you are. Those things that are existent can be found in the outside world through our senses, but those things that are non-existent cannot be found by definition, right? These are two very important words, what's mawjud and what's ma'doom. However, they are not pure nothingness, since non-existence is an ambiguous category, not too much different from existence. The non-existence of the things is a clearly relative matter. It's idafi. So there's no such thing as absolute non-existence. If you think about it, nothing can be 100% non-existent. It just exists in a separate form that we are unaware of. So something is relatively non-existent. But absolute non-existence, as the Sheikh Al-Akbar says, is not there. It's just a concept. It's an abstract concept of the mind. Our mind can talk about absolute non-existence, but in reality, it's not there. For example, a person may claim that galaxies are non-existent, and in relationship to his understanding, this may be a true statement. On another level, your fantasies are non-existent for me, but they're existent for you. That's relativity. On the cosmic level, any creature which can be found in the outside world is existent as long as it continues to be found there. But when it is destroyed or dies or decays, it's easy to be found in its original form, so it is non-existent. Why do we talk about what's being found? Because what's one of the root meanings of wujud? Wajda, right? Wujdan, to find something. When something is in wujud, it means it can be found by definition. So if you say God is wujud, you're also saying and implying in turn that God can be found here and now. Any creature that God has not yet brought into existence is also non-existent, although it certainly exists in some mode, since it is an object of God's knowledge. That's like the furthest point you can go. You will always have existence in God's knowledge, even though that's kind of like a shady form of existence, but it's still a kind of existence. It is found with God. He knows that he will bring it into the cosmos at a certain time and place, so it exists with him, but is non-existent in the cosmos. Ibn Arabi employs the term objects of God's knowledge and ma'lumat synonymously with the term non-existent things. Both terms denote things or creatures as found with God before or after they've existed in the cosmos. However, it needs to be kept in mind that these things never leave God's knowledge. So everything existent in the cosmos at this moment is also a non-existent object of knowledge. Here again, its situation is ambiguous. Let me read that again. However, it needs to be kept in mind that these things never leave God's knowledge. So everything existent in the cosmos at this moment is also a non-existent object of knowledge. Why is it a non-existent object of knowledge? Because we are all non-existent. That's our reality. That's what we own, what we belong to. Why? Because there's no existence but God's existence, right? So we are actually forever non-existent. Here again, a situation is ambiguous. One of the more common and probably best known terms that Ibn Arabi employs for the non-existent object of God's knowledge is immutable entity, ayn thabita. Entity here is synonymous with thing, shay, and which is a word you find in the Quran, kulli shay, right? And thing, as should be apparent from the way I have been employing the term all along, is one of the most indefinite of the indefinites, min ankar al-nakirat, right? This is a dialogue. This is a word you'll find in dialogue between Sahel Tusturi and Iblis, right? Whoever wants to know more about that, you can ask me later on. Since it can be applied to anything whatsoever, existent or non-existent, though it is not normally applied to God as being. The existent things are the creatures of the cosmos, though never ceasing to be non-existent objects of God's knowledge, right? The non-existent things are objects of knowledge, also called the immutable entities. These things or entities are immutable because they never change, just as God's knowledge never changes. He knows them for all eternity. That's the whole point of Ayn Thabita. This is what your actual reality is. Here, of course, we enter onto this very slippery ground of free will and predestination, one of Ibn al-Arabi's favorite topics. When discussing wujud, the central concern of the Muslim peripatetics, right? These are the Aristotelians, such as Ibn Sina. Ibn al-Arabi often borrows the peripatetic term wajib al-wujud, the necessary being. That's God. God is wajib al-wujud. His wujud is wajib. It can't not be. Whereas my wujud is mumkin. It's possible. Like maybe I can come into existence, maybe I can't. My existence isn't guaranteed. So my existence is not wajib. There's only one being in the whole cosmos whose wujud is wajib. It must be. And that is God. So he's wajib al-wujud. Necessary being, that which by its very nature is and cannot not be. This is what we have been referring to as being, with a capital B. In this context, the entities are called the possible things, the mumkinat, since they may or may not exist in the cosmos. In respect to their own possibility, which is their defining characteristic, their relationship to existence and non-existence is the same. It's actually 50-50. There's no reason for me to belong more to existence than to non-existence. An immutable entity is a non-existent possible thing. If God gives preponderance, tarjih, right, to the side of existence over non-existence, it becomes an existent entity, an existent possible thing. This is called this is Ibn Sina's argument, actually, for the existence of God, right? I'll tell you about it later if you want to know more about it. Like entity and thing, and unlike existence, the ontological status of a possible thing has to be specified. These few words that are employed in various contexts as synonyms for the term act all share a certain ambiguity in terms of their reference. To repeat, this is because they are used to describe the domain of existent things, which is ambiguous by nature. You'll keep coming back to this point because the whole of this realm, the whole of being is imagination, which by definition is ambiguous. Only being, the necessary being, is absolutely unquestionable and unambiguous. But since it is utterly free of every limitation that can be applied to anything else, we can only know it by negating from it all the ambiguities of that which is other than being. Things, immutable entities, existent entities, acts, creatures, existence, non-existence, impossible things, and anything else we can name are in themselves not he. Lahu. This is what we might call God's radical transcendence. His utter and absolute incomparability, his tanzih. From this point of view, true knowledge of God can only come through negation. This is the classical position of much of Islamic theology, kalam, but however essential and true, it must be complemented, in Ibn Arabi's view, with the acknowledgement that the acts do possess a certain derivative actuality and existence, which is tashbih. All the more so since we are situated in their midst and cannot ignore them. Everything other than God is not He, which means that it's called ma siwa Allah, right? Which means that everything other than God is not reality, not being, not finding, not knowledge, not power, etc., because it's non-existent in itself. Nevertheless, we do find the effects of these attributes in the existent things, their athar. And this lets us know that He is present. We are nearer to man than the jugular vein, right? And wherever so you turn, there is the face of God. Okay, can I get a reader for the macrocosm? Let me see how far this goes. Okay, we'll go to macrocosm and we'll stop there for today, inshallah. If we get that far, it's quite a big section. Yeah.
Right.
Any volunteers, please?
I can read.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Okay. The macrocosm. The existent things are not scattered randomly, in spite of their ambiguous status. God is the wise, and wisdom, hikmah, discerns the proper place of things and puts them where they belong. God is also uplifter of degrees, Rafi al-darajat. So he arranges all things according to the requirements of their own attributes and qualities. This is the source of the ranking in degrees, the fadl, already mentioned. These names provide important theological roots for the various cosmological teachings found in the works of Muslim authors. Like many other Muslim cosmologists, Ibn al-Arabi bases his scheme largely on the data of the Quran and the Hadith. In the present work, I can only provide a brief outline of the cosmos as he pictures it. The Quran and Hadith are full of terms, many of them presented as complementary pairs. That suggests the dimensions of the cosmos: light and darkness, the heavens and the earth, this world and the next world, the origin and the return, spirit and body, life and death, sun and moon, day and night. All these Quranic pairs find an appropriate place in Ibn al-Arabi's cosmology. To them must be added various sets of terms such as stars, planets, and mansions of the moon, earth, air, water, and fire, animals, plants, and inanimate objects, and so on throughout the natural universe. It is well known that few, if any, sacred texts pay as much attention as the Quran to natural phenomena, which the Quran calls the signs, ayat, of God. Add to these texts the indigenous knowledge of the Arabs and the Greek and Persian legacies that were very early taken over by the Muslims, and one begins to have an idea of the rich sources of Islamic cosmology. To gain an overview of Ibn al-Arabi's system, it may be best to suggest some of the implications of one of the most basic and suggestive of all pairings, that of light and darkness, Nur, Zulma. We have already seen that God is the light of the heavens and the earth, and that light is synonymous with being. The darkness which stands opposite this uncreated light of God is nothingness, absolute non existence. But there is also a created light that pertains to the cosmos. Nur, like wujud, is applied to both God and the creatures. The angels, Malaika, for example, are, according to the Prophet, created from light, which is to say that their very substance is woven from light. This is not the light which is God, for God in himself is infinitely incomparable, even with the greatest of the angels, all of whom are creatures. So the light out of which the angels have been shaped and formed is the immediate radiance of light or being. Then there are other creatures who are dark in relation to the angels, since they have been made out of clay. These things cannot be pure in utter darkness, since they exist. Their light or existence is obscured by their distance from the absolute light, which is the source of cosmic light, but it is real light. These creatures, created out of relative darkness that is extremely dim light, inhabit the earth, which itself is basically clay, earth, and water. Though the more luminous elements, air and fire, also play important roles, the four elements are known as the pillars, arkan of terrestrial existence. The slightest meditation on the relationship between light and darkness shows that they are relative things. In a dark room, a candle is a bright light, but in the desert at noon, it is virtually non existent. Fireflies fill the nights of June with radiance, but no one finds them in the daytime. The moon is a marvelous lamp, but it quickly flees the scene when the sun appears. Much of the terminology that Ibn al-Arabi employs in referring to existent things possesses the same relativity, and indeed one can say that every attribute that is applied to every existing thing in the universe has to be understood in relative terms. This type of relativity fits into the category of ranking in degrees or tafaddul. If an angel is made out of light, it is nevertheless dark in relation to God. If a stone is dark, it is nevertheless light in relation to nothingness. If one person is intelligent, someone can always be found who is more intelligent. The only absolutes are the divine essence on the one hand and nothingness on the other. These are the two poles between which the cosmos takes shape. All the basic terms that Ibn al-Arabi employs to describe the structure of the cosmos must be viewed in relative terms. When we say that there are two basic kinds of existent, those made of light and those made of clay, this means that pure created light and pure clay are, relatively speaking, two cosmic poles. Between them, all the existent things in the cosmos are arranged according to any attribute that one wants to take into account. When Ibn al-Arabi speaks about the hierarchy of the cosmos, Tartib al-Alam, as he does in great detail in many passages of the Futuhat, he has in view the various degrees of existence of finding the ontological levels, maratib al-wujud, of the universe, or in other words, the various degrees in which the creatures participate in the divine presence. But when he has in view the various positive divine attributes such as knowledge, power, or generosity, then he uses the terms tafadul or ranking in degrees to describe how each creature reflects or participates in these attributes to a different extent. Some of the most important pairs of terms that are used to relate the existent things to the two poles of the cosmos are luminous, nurani, and dark, zulmani, subtle latif, and dense khatif, spiritual, ruhani, and corporeal, jismani, unseen, ghaib, invisible, shahada, high, ulvi, and low, sufli. Each term designates a relative situation. What is subtle in relation to one thing is dense in relation to another. When it is said that the angels are luminous, subtle, spiritual, unseen, and high, a relationship is envisaged with all those things that are dark, dense, corporeal, visible, and low. It is not forgotten that the angels are, in fact, dark and dense in relationship to the infinite light of God. Viewed in the context of relative contrast and conflict, each attribute is taken to be incompatible with its opposite. This means that the angels have no direct relationship with the things of the corporeal world. Light does not perceive the darkness, nor darkness comprehend the light. The angels are pure unitive awareness, while the corporeal things as such are conglomerations of unconscious parts and conflicting bits. Each part, which may be viewed as a relatively independent corporeal thing, has come into existence through a temporary marriage of the four elements in a specific balance that gives it its chemical characteristics. Example, the ascending or fiery element may dominate over the descending or earthy element. But viewed as a continuous hierarchy, the existent things are ranged between the most intense created light and the most intense darkness. The least intense light, or intense darkness equals the least intense light. And this tells us that there must be innumerable degrees of intermediate creatures between pure light and pure darkness. In this context, it needs to be remembered pure means the most intense in existence. It does not signify absolute, since absolute light is God, while absolute darkness is sheer nothingness. These intermediate degrees are known as barzakhs, literally isthmuses. A barzakh is something that stands between and separates two other things, yet combines the attributes of both. Strictly speaking, every existent thing is a barzakh, since everything has its own niche between two other niches within the ontological hierarchy known as the cosmos. There is nothing in existence but barzakh, since a barzakh is the arrangement of one thing between two other things, and existence has no edges, taraf. Existence itself is a barzakh between being and nothingness. In the hierarchy of worlds which makes up the cosmos, the term barzakh refers to an intermediate world standing between the luminous or spiritual world and the dark or corporeal world. The term is relative, like other cosmological terms, but it helps us to situate existent things in the cosmos with a bit more precision. Instead of saying that things are either spiritual or corporeal, we can now say that they may also be barzakhi, that is to say, neither spiritual nor corporeal, but somewhere in between. The term barzakh is often used to refer to the whole intermediate realm between the spiritual and the corporeal. In this sense, the term is synonymous with the world of imagination, khayal, or images, mithal. From this perspective, there are basically three kinds of existent things: spiritual, imaginal, or barzakhi, and corporeal. The imaginal world is more real than the corporeal world, since it is situated closer to the world of light, though it is less real than the spiritual and luminous realm of the angels. Imaginary things possess a certain kinship with imaginal things, but only as a sort of weak reverberation. Nevertheless, we can gain help in understanding the nature of the world of imagination by reflecting upon our own mental experience of imagination. The most specific characteristic of things found within the domain of imagination, on whatever level it is considered, is their intermediary and ambiguous state. When we understand the pairs of terms mentioned above as extreme poles or as relatively absolute ontological situations, then we can see that nothing found on the imaginal level corresponds to one or the other of the two poles. Imaginal existence are neither luminous nor dark, neither spiritual nor corporeal, neither subtle nor dense, neither high nor low. In every case, they are somewhere in between, which is to say that they are both and. When we consider the pairs of terms, which denote the extremes as relative terms, then all of them apply to imagination, depending on the perspective. Imaginal things are subtle in relation to the corporeal world, but dense in relation to the spiritual world. They are luminous in relation to visible things, but dark in relation to unseen things. Ibn al-Arabi often employs expressions like corporealization of the spirits, the tajassud al-arwah, and spiritualization of corporeal bodies, tarawhun al-ajsam, to explain what sorts of events take place in the imaginal realm. It is here, he says, that the friends of God have visions of past prophets, or that after death, all the works of a person will be given back to him in a form appropriate to the intention and reality behind the work, not in the form of the work itself. Those Muslim thinkers who deal with the imaginal world, and there are many, as Corbyn's researchers have helped to show, love to point to dreams as our most direct and common experience of its ontological status. In the dream world, the things we perceive share in the luminosity of our own consciousness, yet they are presented to us as corporeal and dense things, not as disembodied spirits. Since the world of spirits manifests directly the unity of the divine, angels have no part, while the world of corporeal things appears to us as infinite multiplicity. But the world of dreams combines unity and multiplicity. A single dreaming subject perceives a multiplicity of forms and things that in fact are nothing but his own single self. Their manyness is but the mode that the one consciousness assumes in displaying various facets of itself. It was just said that the most
Sorry,
specific...
Emma, that's
Yes.
beautiful. Can I interrupt you 1 second?
Oh,
So,
of course.
so someone was asking in the Fusus chat room today, like, I'm having trouble with this concept that we're studying in the Fusus, that everything we see is me, right? And that is a hard concept to get your head around. It is. But if, this is a brilliant way to understand it. If you look at dreams, in dreams, I see my neighbor, I see my teacher, and I see the ice cream man, and because that's obviously what I like and enjoy. Anyone who gives me sweets. I see kings, and I see donkeys, and I see landscapes, I see castles, right? And I go to different places. But in a dream, all those things are you. Is anyone having a dream but you? All those things are you. Now, there's another hadith which most of you will know, in which Rasulullah says that everyone is asleep. Like right now, we're asleep. When you die, then what? When you die,
You wake up.
you wake up. But in Arabic, it's you come to attention. Now suddenly you're aware. You have true awareness, true consciousness. That's when you really wake up. You come to attention when you die. This whole thing we're in, it's a dream. So this is a beautiful matrix metaphor. And when we die and we wake up, we're like the person who has slept and had a dream and woke up, and then you're like, oh, I dreamt about this and that. That's what's going to happen when you die. You'll be like, oh, I did this and that. And it has the quality of a dream. That's another way of understanding this idea, that everything you see around you and that happens to you is you. Sorry, Emma, can you carry on, please?
Can somebody else read? I have to hop off. I have a work meeting now. But this is super interesting. I'm very excited to be reading all of this, and I'll catch up on the portion that. Yes.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next person, please. I mean, I can finish it too, but okay, then just let me finish it then, inshallah. So a single dreaming subject perceives a multiplicity of forms and things that, in fact, are nothing but his own single self. That's what a dream is. Their manyness is but the mode that the one consciousness assumes in displaying various facets of itself, the multiplicity of forms of images in its own self. It was just said that the most specific characteristic of imaginal things is their intermediary and ambiguous situation. It's not one thing or the other, it's ambiguous. From everything we have said about existent things in general, it should be clear that all existent things share in a similar ambiguity, since they are neither being nor nothingness, but somewhere in between. Existence as a whole, as was said above, is a barzakh, an intermediary realm between being, wujud, and nothingness. Ma'dum. Hence, or sorry, al-adam actually, al-wujud and al-adam. Hence, existence as a whole can be called imagination. The whole of existence can be called imagination. When Ibn al-Arabi uses the term imagination, he most often has in mind the intermediary realm between the spiritual and corporeal worlds. But sometimes he means existence per se. In a few passages, he clarifies the distinction between the two kinds of imagination by calling the cosmos non-delimited imagination, al-khayal al-mutlaq. The cosmos, al-alam, is al-khayal al-mutlaq. And in the imaginal world, the world that's in between the physical world and the spiritual world, is delimited imagination, al-khayal al-muqayyad. The accompanying diagram shows the overall structure of Ibn Arabi's most elementary cosmological scheme. Note that there are two intermediary domains of existence. As such, non-delimited imagination, which stands between being and nothingness, and the imaginal world, which is delimited imagination, which stands between the spiritual and corporeal worlds. It needs to be kept in mind that the cosmos is imagination only in the specific sense of the term as defined above. In no sense does this imply that things out there are imaginary. He's not saying that things are imaginary, they're a fiction of our imagination, they're made up. That's not what he's saying. Any more than we ourselves are imaginary. This is the diagram, right? So it's interesting because the Sheikh Al-Akbar says that the shape of the cosmos is what? What does that look like to you? What shape does that look like to you?
A cone. A horn.
A cone or a horn? What's the horn in the Quran?
قرن.
Not qarn, because that's a different kind of horn.
ونفخ في الصور.
The sur, yes, that's the sur. The whole, that is the sur. So I think when Israfil blows into the sur, that's what he's blowing into. So you can see the point. Now, you can't see my finger, right? But if you fall from nothingness, corporeal world, world of imagination, the world of spirits, all the way to the dot above, that's the physical world. It's nothing. Like, despite the hugeness of the physical world that you see and how big you think it is, it's just a dot, because the world of the spirits and the imagination is much bigger, right? Sorry, you can also call the corporeal world what's at the bottom. And nothingness is the biggest realm of all. And as you go up, the realms become more unified. So there's less multiplicity. So it becomes smaller. So the corporeal world is wide because there's more multiplicity. I know I just said that it's small, but there's two perspectives. So one perspective is that the corporeal world is big because it's multiple. Then you go to the world of spirits. It's not multiple, it's more unified. So it has less multiplicity in it in that sense. But actually, the alam al-ghaib, which is where the spirits are, is gigantic. And the corporeal world is small in relation to the world of the spirits, right? Or sorry, the alam al-ghaib is huge in relation to the physical world. Okay, so let's carry on and just finish this off. Ibn al-Arabi describes non-delimited imagination as a horn made of light. Yeah, so this is the horn made out of light. The whole of the cosmos is a horn made out of light. It's a sur made out of nur. Okay. We ourselves are parts of the cosmos and partake of its ontological status, and it provides our only path to true knowledge of ourselves and of God. Moreover, the cosmos is God's imagination, not our imagination. In fact, in another part of the same book, the Sufi Path of Knowledge, Ibn Arabi will say the cosmos is God's dream. Ajib. He imagines everything other than himself, but by doing so, he gives all things a certain mode of real and seemingly independent existence. Our independent existence is imaginary. This non-delimited imagination of God is also God's self-manifestation, his duhur, or his self-disclosure, his tajalli. terms that will be discussed in detail as we go along. For now, it's sufficient to look at one implication of the term self-manifestation, his duhur. According to the Quran, God is he's the outward or the manifest, al-zahir, and the inward or non-manifest, al-batin. So it can be said that God is non-manifest, he's batin, in the sense that his essence is in itself remains forever unknown to the creatures, while he is manifest, he's zahir, inasmuch as the cosmos reveals something of his names and attributes. So he's zahir and batin. The question arises as to which divine attributes are revealed by the divine acts. The answer is that, generally speaking, every name of God has loci and manifestation. Every name of God has a madhar, and they're all madahir in the cosmos. Some obvious and some hidden. So what is a madhar? What is a locus of manifestation? Like apple is the madhar for the name Ar-Razaq. Apple is the locus of manifestation for the name, for the divine name, the nourisher. Sun, like the sun in the sky, is the madhar for the name An-Nur, and so on and so forth. The universe as a whole manifests all the names of God. Within the existent things is found every attribute of being in some mode or another. Even such attributes as incomparability and unknowability that apply in a strict sense only to the essence can be found in a relative sense among the possible things. Or again, one could say that every divine attribute is found in an absolute sense in God alone. But in a relative sense in the creatures. The cosmos considered as a whole, single whole, is the locus of manifestation for all the divine names. So it's actually the theater for the divine names. Literally, it's like a play. Or what comes down to the same thing for the name Allah. So the whole cosmos is the madhar for the name Allah, which is the name that brings together all the other names. Literally, Allah is called al-ism al-jama'. Hence, says Ibn al-Arabi, God created the cosmos in his own image, fi suratihi. Or to use a better translation of the Arabic term surah, his own form. So also, as the Prophet ﷺ reported, God created Adam upon his own form. So, خلق الله Adam على suratihi, or على surah al-Rahman. Allah made Adam upon his own form. So just as God brings together all the names, Sayyidina Adam ﷺ, the perfect human being, brings together all the divine attributes in his own self. Hence, the universe is the great man, Insan Kabir, while man is a small universe, Alam Saghir. And we're going to stop there. And now we can take questions, inshallah. So the next section is microcosm, then cosmic dynamics. Yeah, so we may need like a couple more lessons before we finish this section, mashallah. Oh, there's quite a bit to cover. Okay. Yes, please. Any other questions? I will stop sharing. Go ahead, Huma.
So Sidna, what is the connection between Sur, the horn that Israfil will blow into, and Surat, the painting, drawing, and the face, that particular word? Because they are the same root, correct?
The same root. Let me double
That-
check that. I'm not sure that they are the same root. Is it with a sod or a sin? Wait, let me just double check. This word. Yes, it's the same root. Yes,
Yeah.
if I'm
Yeah,
not
with the
mistaken, yes.
swad. Yeah, with the
With
swad.
the sod, yeah, it is. You're right.
The swad.
Yeah. Yes, that's an interesting question. I don't know what's the connection because one is form, the
Mhm.
other is the horn, the trumpet. I need to look it up. Good question. Let
Yes.
me look it up now. But if anyone else wants to ask anything, please go ahead and ask because I'm gonna look this up. Are there any other questions or anything confusing you?
I have. I don't know how to formulate it actually.
Sure,
so
go ahead, CD.
I think it was a lot of information, at least for me, a lot of new information first and foremost, and maybe how how do I phrase it? Can you maybe like clarify a little bit more what is meant by words of spirit, word of imagination, and corporeal world, also in relation to the terms barzakh, ayn, and thabita, and yeah, immutable objects, I think was the translation. And what was the last one? Yeah, forms and meaning, like what is the correlation between the different layers of the worlds, and where do the like the terms fit in?
Okay,
Yeah.
so these are all basic terms, so thank you for asking that. Tell me if I'm actually answering your question or not. So you can conceive the whole wujud as a spectrum. You've got absolute wujud on one end of the spectrum and absolute non-existence on the other end of the spectrum, right? You could also think of it as pure light on one end of the spectrum, which is pure wujud, which is Allah, and pure darkness, which is the other end of the spectrum, right? So all the worlds exist in between those two ends of the spectrum, okay?
Okay, but the spectrum is imaginary. It's not like inscription of the actual the actual how the world is. It's just the spectrum to understand where these things lie in between.
So it's not imaginary. This is an excellent question. There is hierarchy. There is hierarchy in the worlds. So you could say that like the spiritual world is the highest world.
But we did say that there is no nothingness, right? I mean, the spectrum is just for like to have a better understanding for us as humans, or is the spectrum the actual?
But I'll tell you what is not what is not imaginary. I'll tell you what's not imaginary. So you've got the highest. Actually, the highest realm is the realm of God's knowledge, right? His ilm of the ayn thabita. Below that is the realm of the spirits, alam al arwah. Below that is alam al khayal, because it stands in between everything. Below that then is the alam al ajsad. It's the world of bodies. So the world we're in now is the lowest world.
Yes.
So there is a hierarchy of realms, which is not imaginary. And then you go higher and higher, yeah? So that's real. Then form, which is surah, and ma'na. Ma'na, it's also called the ma'nawiyat. They come from the alam al-arwah. That's where meanings come from. Forms, the sur, come from where? Alam al-ajsad, the world of bodies. The body is what embodies or captures meaning or spirits. So actually, ma'na and spirits are very close to each other. They mean very similar things. Like what body is to spirit, okay, what jasad is to ruh, surah is to ma'na. Yeah.
And what's the difference between meaning and spirit?
They're actually very close. There isn't that much of a difference actually, but it's the way you use the words. So if I say the ma'na, the ma'na tells you the purpose of the thing. It's inner dimension, right? Although the spirit is a technical term to talk about the way the body is being governed. So we have a ruh that right that's created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He blows into our body the ruh. Plants have what's called like a vital force. That's also a ruh. Animals have an animal ruh within them as well. So all things in the cosmos actually have some kind of a ruh within them that gives them its ma'na, its meaning, right? And then the difference between those two terms will become clear as we go on throughout the course. Like you'll see, I know, because now it's just like information overload, right? But you'll get it more as we go on. Yeah. Did I at least answer? Yeah, go ahead.
I think partly yes. Yeah, so thank you first and foremost. Like, I think the hierarchy is clear now for me. And where does the term Aina Tabita fit in this immutable object?
Ayn Thabita. Let me see if I can find like a voice note from our chat rooms. I'll forward it to you in the Sufi Pathology chat room because I've talked about it before. The Ayn Thabita is called the immutable entity. It's a Mu'tazili word. It's a Mu'tazili word that Ibn Arabi took, and then it means the ma'lumat, the things that God knows in His knowledge as they are in itself. But it's better if I send you a voice note, okay? So I can give people a chance to ask questions because this is a long subject. Okay.
Okay.
I'll send
Thank
you a
you very
voice note,
much.
inshallah.
Mhm.
Thank you very much, CD.
Thank
Who's
you.
next?
There's a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead. Because I can't see right now. I think I'll stop sharing, and that will let me see it. Bismillah. Okay, here we go. Ghada. Okay, wait. Was that a question? Okay. Okay, wait. Let me see if there's a.
Can I just ask a quick one?
Yeah, go ahead. And then I think we've got Senna, right? Yeah, go ahead.
It's about the hadith about when you dream of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's the true dream.
Yes.
When you see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a true dream. So we are the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How does that fit into the whole hierarchy of things or cosmology or whatever you call it?
That's just a separate issue though, right? Like when you have like an actual dream, then you see Rasul, then it's actually him, right? But you're asking how to relate that, how to relate that cosmologically, right?
Yeah, to the whole that we've just heard about. Everything is me. Everything that I see in my dream is me. Everything is
yes.
Allah's. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of happy that there's like. I don't know, I'm going to leave that to you because I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, you're asking a clever question, but it's more of a question for Sheikh Al-Akbar, but I'm going to give it a go anyways. So, you know, like if you see like an actual prophet in real life, right? You're seeing your inner prophet, and if you see a devil, you're seeing your own inner devil. Then the question becomes, do you accept your inner prophet and do you reject your inner devil, for example, right? So like who are the martyred prophets? Like Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, Sayyidina Zakaria, and there's one other one, there's like three of them who were martyred. That's like the people killing their own inner prophet, right? That's like killing your own inner prophet.
Yeah.
Or if you talk about like Qawm Hud and Qawm Salih, if you reject the prophet or you kill the Naqat Allah, the Naqat Allah represents your purest thing. So you've killed the purest thing in your own soul, then you die. That's why that Qawm perished.
Yeah.
And if you accept the prophet in your own lifetime, the one that you see with your own eyes, then you accepted your own inner prophet, which means your own inner guidance.
Yeah.
In that sense. Yeah, good point. That's why I love these stories like from Edgar Allan Poe when he talks about, I forgot what's the name of the story, but like the man, he kills the man and then he finds the blood on himself and the wounds on himself, because to kill the man was to kill himself. That was Edgar Allan Poe's insight. Yes. Wait, let me take Sana and then Huma, inshallah. If everything is I see in the dream is me and an imaginal form of my consciousness, then what about the knowledge which is directly given by God to a wali? That knowledge is not a reflection of the wali's consciousness because it's is it because it's if given by God, or is it because it is given by God, or is it no okay, Sana, huh? Sheikh Al-Akbar, if you go to the Fusus al-Hikam, we come up to Fas Nuh. He will say, even you seeing God is seeing yourself. You're just seeing your divine form reflected in God. Even seeing God is just seeing yourself. So even to that extent, it's seeing your own self. So Muhib Allah ilaha badi, one of the great mystics of India, the second Ibn Arabi he's called, wrote a beautiful treatise that is translated by Gregory Lipton. It's called the Taswiyah. And he mentions in it that actually when Rasulullah received the revelation from Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, he says Jibreel came from him. So he only received it from his own self. Ajib. That would come from this perspective. Yes, Huma, please.
Siddhi, you mentioned this second Ibn Arabi from India. What was his name? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Muhib Allah ilaha badi.
Muhibullah Alabadi. Okay. Thank you so much. So my question or musing is that was about actually the question I had asked. What is the connection between the sur and the surah or the form? And I think and it's in opposite order, but hear me out. You know how the ruh has to be blown into the jasad, into the body.
Yes.
So this blowing action of the horn, it reminds one of the initial blowing of from the world of spirits, the alimul ghaib or the alimul arwah, into the corporeal world, into the alimul ajsad, into each jasad. The spirit is blown in as if through
Yes.
a corn, as if the act of blowing in. And
subhanAllah. Oh,
right?
nice
And it
connection.
goes
Yes.
through the medium of the alimul khayal because it has to be imagined. It has to be exist in Allah Ta'ala's khayal and in that imaginal world to get a form. So the meaning and form and ruh and jasad have to kind of blow in from one end to the more material corporeal existence that we see.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Yeah, but this
Sorry.
doesn't capture the end of the world. Maybe it's a mirror reflection kind of a thing we are catching on to here. But
Yeah,
thank you
sure.
so much for hearing me out.
No, by the way, that's like really good point. Alhamdulillah. Actually, Ghada's note was alluding to this as well. So the meaning can also be when the souls are blown into the forms of the dead, right? And that's the connection. Forms as a jama' of surah, and then the actual horn itself. Yeah, that's really good. So the bodies are the horns in that sense. SubhanAllah. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
So I had a question when we were reading the second section that we read.
Yes.
And it said that even things that do come into existence, nothing ever leaves that place of non-existence in God's knowledge. So can we think of that as almost like a reservoir that remains with God of even of things that are existent? And can we think of that reservoir as like a wellspring for endless rebirth or reinvention, as per what Ibn Arabi asserts, that in every moment, everything ceases to exist and then is brought back into existence anew?
SubhanAllah. That's a very interesting idea. Why not? Sure. A reservoir, right? MashaAllah. Yeah. Yeah, could be. Could be. MashaAllah. Sahar.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
It caught my attention about when reading about God's imagination. So I
Yeah.
wondered, I'm not really sure if it has like a connection or something between God's imagination and our imagination. Like, is it connected or is it different things or I'm not sure about that.
SubhanAllah. There has to be a connection. Yeah, there has to be. I'd have to think about that. But when you talk about God's imagination is the whole cosmos. Everything, Masi Allah, that's his imagination. Well, then our imagination is the cosmos that we see within ourselves.
But I feel as well, and I'm not sure about that, but this is what I feel. It could be my personal experience as well. It's not only the imagination, our imagination about ourselves, but it could be as well something not related to ourselves that we can see, like maybe God is lifting hijab for some people, maybe for يعني for less than a second, I don't know, يعني very very little amount of time to see something, like it could be, and as well as dreams. This is what I think. I'm not sure how true is that. It could be as well something about self, or it could be something to see. I mean, I'm not sure about that as well.
No,
I mean,
that's completely
cosmos.
true.
Yeah.
When you have dreams, like it depends on the quality of the dream, right? It
Mm.
could be a kashf, but it can also not be a kashf. And when it is a kashf, then it can be a kashf of one of the worlds, the world of the spirits, the world of the imagination, or even the world of bodies. It can be one of those three worlds, or the world of God's knowledge. That's the fourth world, actually.
Mm. Amazing, amazing. جزاكم الله كل خير.
Allah yabarak fiki. It is amazing, huh? And Sana, okay, so the dialogue between Sahel Tustari and Iblis, I would have talked about it in the previous course I gave on Ibn al-Arabi's life, but it's to do with the word Ankara al-Nakirat, the most indefinite of indefinite things, which is called what? Shay. Shay is Ankara al-Nakirat, right? Because anything can be a Shay. So Shay is the most indefinite of all things. Anything can be a Shay. So in a dream or in a vision, one of the major awliya of Allah, his name is Sahel Tustari, Qadasallahu sirruhu, he's actually called Hujjat Allah, the way Imam Ghazali is called Hujjat al-Islam. So Sahel Tustari is called Hujjat Allah, right? So he's a major wali. And he sees Iblis. And then he tells Iblis that I don't imagine you will have forgiveness in the next life. And I don't imagine you can be sa'id. I don't imagine you can be happy in the next life. Or that God would do that for you. So then Iblis said, I'm very surprised to hear you say that, Sal, because you are limiting God's mercy, right? But you are a creature who's muqayyad, you're limited. So a creature who's muqayyad will limit God's mercy. But here's the thing, God is unlimited. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَرَحْمَتِي وَاسِعَتْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, right? So that means if God's mercy encompasses all things, the thing is ankara nakirat. It's the most in-depth of all things. So that means Iblis says, that means I'm a thing. So his mercy will encompass me too. And then Sheikh Al-Akbar says, on this issue, Iblis was Sahl's teacher. Ajib. Allah barak fiki. If there are no more questions, I'm gonna stop the recording and we'll just call it an evening, inshallah. And then, here, so let's just stop the recording then.